Hey everybody, it's day 99 of Training Daily Excellence. My name is Brad Gieske, and today we are talking about how energy is made and utilized in the human body. We all know that when we consume food, that food contains energy, and that energy allows us to go about muscular effort. Now, whether that's sprinting on the field, jumping up for a head ball, striking the ball with our foot, all of these actions depend on energy, and that energy comes from food. But how does the energy in food become our muscular efforts? This answer is both simple and very complex. It's simple because we can just start thinking about something called phosphate bonds, and that's going to give us a lot of our answer. It's complex because the metabolic pathways in which our body utilizes different nutrients is very complex. They come into different places, and it takes a lot of study to understand those. But understanding that phosphate bonds carry a high amount of energy is going to be our main consideration in this talk. Now, our body has a molecule called adenosine triphosphate. It has 3 phosphate bonds. And the breaking of those bonds, really the 2 terminal bonds, is going to produce energy for us. And it's the most common way that our body goes about releasing energy and goes about making energy for muscular effort. So we do have another pathway with creatine phosphate, and there's actually GTP, so guanine triphosphate, but these are lesser utilized energy pathways. So ATP is going to be our main one. Now, at the initiation of exercise, when we're going at a high intensity or just really the initial effort, we're going to use something called creatine phosphate. And so we'll break that phosphate bond there, and once we break the phosphate from the creatine, we'll produce an energy right away, instantly, but we have a very limited supply of that molecule. So the same is kind of true of ATP, with the exception that we regenerate a lot of ATP, and ATP is stored in all of our muscle cells. So ATP can come from our carbohydrates being broken down, both anaerobically and aerobically, or it can come from lipids aerobically, or and this is way less on the amount, but it could be from our amino acids as well. And I'm just going to talk briefly about the carbohydrate pathway. So if we don't have oxygen present, we'll either go ahead and go through glycolysis and produce lactate, and so we'll get a lesser yield of ATP molecules, or we'll go through a full aerobic process, and we'll go from glycolysis, and then oxygen's present, so we'll go through the Krebs cycle, something called the Krebs cycle. This will happen in the outer mitochondrial membrane, and then we'll move to the inner mitochondrial membrane, and we'll do something called the electron transport chain. And in the electron transport chain, we really get a high yield of ATP, so these energy-containing molecules. And so then when we produce all of this ATP, then our muscle is supplied with energy. But to go through the full aerobic process, to go through all these metabolic steps, it's time-consuming, and so it limits the intensity of our exercise. But then the intensity of our exercise is limited by the amount of the aerobic anaerobically available ATP. And so it's this semi-contradiction of trying to work really hard very quickly and then balancing that with a sustainable source of energy, one that produces a ton of energy, but over a prolonged period of time, because and that's really the difference between endurance-based activities and power-based activities is the mechanism in which we're going about. So you can't do a power-based activity like you do a marathon. You can't do a 10-hour power-based activity, but it is possible to run for 10 hours. And so all of this really comes back to the energy that you're getting for your workouts, for your trainings, for your games is coming from your food. And that food has chemical energy in it. And then that chemical energy we go about using to produce ATP, which then allows us to release energy. And that energy is basically the energy that we're using for cellular work. So that energy is what we're using to produce our muscle actions. So thank you so much. Tomorrow's video is going to be incredible. Jake Gish is putting it together. You guys are going to love it. This video got a little long, but I hope it starts to explain a little bit about how we're making and utilizing energy in the human body. Thanks, guys.